And we are live back in the Honorable House in the Parliament. We are live from downtown Castries. We just concluded earlier our COVID-19 response report for today, Thursday, the 28th of May 2020. And now we are on standby for the commencement of the Senate sitting of the Upper House in the Parliament today. My name is Jessie Leonce. I'm joined by my colleague Carlton Cyril as we await the beginning of the Senate proceedings. Carlton?
Merci encore et qu'on nous a dit bonjour pour vous qui a écouté nous. Aujourd'hui c'est jeudi le 28 mai qu'on a bien observé. Ou après nous aujourd'hui à sorti hot kai concert comme Jesse bien dit, il a continué ici au kai changer mardi nous t'es ici en kai concert là et aujourd'hui à faire à continuer. En parmi bagaille qui a discuté pour kai savent les venir pour gouvernement avec honorable Premier ministre Alan Chasney qui a demandé permission pour lire parmi bagaille ajouter état de secours. Ou qu'ils savent à présent état de secours ça supposé bout en bout de mois et bien à présent il a demandé date qui nous ça aller juste le 30 mai septembre excusez-moi qui a commencé le 1er juin et puis l'autre le Premier ministre pour finance a demandé permission pour prêter pas plus passer 85 millions de dollars. Et la première part, nous avons l'autre motion qui a trouvé qu'on présenté, c'est le ministre Finance qui a demandé pour prêter 29 millions de dollars américains. Et puis, en parmi les nous avons qui ministre Honorable Guy Joseph qui a dit la pour aller en parmi les pays pour développement, pays pour afin qu'il ait fait un pays pour mener activité économique. Là aussi, pour prendre en considération, là, il vient pour un amendement pour CIP, nous avons ça aussi. Et bien important pour vous, ça, là, il vient pour situation, il n'y a pas qu'à permettre les membres publics d'entrer en caille concite. Et vous avez sa raison pour ça, c'est parce que protocole qui déjà établi, là, il vient pour distance sociale, là, bien important pour vous observer pour juste un caille concite. Il n'y a pas qu'à permettre membres publics pour venir et que yon bagay ko observer tout le monde ni masque tout partout yo a mettre bay pour sanitize la main ça c'est une information nous ka faut savent mais nous ka aussi d'où vous savez nous sur internet ou ça là sur page Facebook gouvernement Saint-Lucie et puis parmi l'autre bagay vous savez en les channel 122. Bien bonjour et merci avant nous te point pause là nous avons parmi information qu'on nous y pour date 41 tests vie négatifs bonne nouvelle qu'a sorti hot CMO et que yon a ces bagay là bien dit à présentation yon laissé travailler essentiel c'est moun ça yo ka tester yo parce que ça c'est yo qui devant les venir pour tout ça qui a fait là nous aussi tant bonne nouvelle encore en 151 7 lycéens vie repatriés vie Saint-Lucie et puis bonne nouvelle nous et puis parmi l'autre internet là nous avons espéré pour faire commencer ici en nom c'est Carlton Cyril ici ensemble et puis Jesse Leonce.
Thanks for that, Carlton. And just to let you know some of these senators that we can see at this time in terms of the government senators present so far is Senator the Honorable Fortuna Belrose, the Minister with responsibility for culture and the creative industries. We also have the Senator Francisco Japierre present, as well as the opposition senators. We have Senator Gideon Ferdinand and Senator Jerome Gideon, and we await the arrival of we also have independent senators, the two independent senators present, Senator Adrian Ogier there. We await the arrival of the remaining senators for this morning to begin this morning's proceedings. And it's a continuation of the parliamentary proceedings from Tuesday, a petition among other senatorial business, a Senate sitting business. Be it resolved motions, be it resolved that Parliament further extend for an additional period commencing from the 1st day of June 2020 and ending on the 30th of September 2020 in accordance with Section 17(6) of the Constitution of St. Lucia, Cap 101, the Constitution of St. Lucia, extension of resolution of Parliament approving declaration of Senate of state of emergency passed as statutory instrument number 60 of 2020 that extended the state of emergency for an additional period commencing from the 27th day of April 2020 and ending on the 31st day of May 2020. In short, the Honorable Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Economic Growth, Job Creation, External Affairs and the Public Service is making a bid in the Honorable House for an extension of the state of emergency for another 4 months ending on the 30th of September. A petition is also being made to authorize the Prime Minister and Minister for Finance to borrow by means of advances sums not exceeding $85 million from commercial banks for a period of 6 months from the date hereof, which sums shall be charged on and paid out of the consolidated fund. Be it resolved that the Parliament authorizes the Minister for Finance to borrow the sum of US $29 million by way of a rapid credit facility loan from the International Monetary Fund for the purpose of capital and recurrent expenditure. The loan is repayable at a 0% interest rate inclusive of a 5.5 years grace period with a final maturity of 10 years and semi-annually through a standing authorization to the International Monetary Fund to debit St. Lucia's XDR account with the amount of all financial obligations to the International Monetary Fund for the Rapid Credit Facility loan as the financial obligations fall due. So the Senate will be meeting this morning, again, just to let you know, scheduled to begin at 10 a.m. It's 10:19. We'll be having a late start, but they will be meeting to continue the debate for these following motions. Okay.
Et puis, oui, Jesse, comme Jesse a bien dit, bon matin, nous quand nous venons pour préparer pour le Sénat, parmi les bagages qu'on nous bien dit, qui a discuté, nous avons le ministre honorable Alan Chasney qui est responsable pour finance parmi l'autre bagages, secteur public là. Nous avons qui proposé pour prêter l'argent qui te voulait permission, ou bien ça, il brise permission Parlement pour faire ça. Qui était commencé motion ça qu'on a pour Hodia nous avons Sénat là qu'a joindre déjà nous qu'a fait gamme nous yon des anciens sénateurs arrivé parmi nous sénateur Roger ici pour opposition là nous
Jerome Gideon,
Senator
Jerome Gideon, Senator Gideon Ferdinand.
Nous M. Ferdinand aussi à sous side gouvernement, nous ministre qui est responsable pour sécurité, Homan Gill ici, on a sénateur Homan Gill, Petrona ici aussi, et puis ça qui fait là c'est là tout ici nous avons commencé à faire mais pour la peine pour demander qui ça qui vient faire comme tu as dit et plus bon nous tant Jesse et l'homme non là vient pour ajouter état de secours ou qu'ils savent état de secours supposé bout mois ça mais nous avons trouvé quoi ajouter et puis ajouter quand nous tant premier ministre là-bas en chaque raison ajouter pour les tenter premier ministre là-bas en chaque raison pour ça nous aussi ouais premier ministre comme ministre des finances a demandé permission pour prêter pas plus passer 85 millions de dollars et puis l'autre résolution c'est côté motion c'est côté parlement qui a autorisation pour ministre des finances pour prêter 29 millions de dollars à IMF ou qu'ils savent là les conditions pour ça parmi ces conditions et 0% l'intérêt à souille et puis là ou qu'il 5 années pour 5 années et demi et puis ça qu'il maturité loan ça qu'il maturité en 10 ans parmi l'autre bagaille autorisation hod ça kay trouvé quoi là déposé dans compte XDR à compte Saint-Lucie ça y est et puis obligation les vini pour IMF là l'autre matière nous supposé point pour qui nous kay point pour considération c'est les vini pour aussi et puis en tout nous avons dit qu'à commencer il après 10 heures mais bagay supposé commencer ici à un moment. Il est bien important aussi pour nous répéter avec nous qui est venu pour protocole qui déjà établi les autorités par les autorités qui ont managé vermin Covid là on a bien observé nous pas ni gens public là yo pendant kay concitoyens raison pour ça bien clair ou kay ça nous ka essayer de distance sociale là yon qui plus content mais yon a ces bagay là kay bien ouais qui clair ici les venir pour protocole c'est masque là c'est sanitizer pour la main parmi l'autre bagay on a sous ka katile calé jeudi continuation ça qui a commencé mardi côté Sénat là présent kay jeune avec nous kay une contribution qu'a sorti chaque façade Sénat là et puis si tout marché nous kay ces émotion ça en action quoi nous toujours kay pressé ou qui a jeune et puis nous qu'a coûté ces gens noirs sur radio expressement ces gens Facebook non ces gens l'autre pays toujours yon plaisir aujourd'hui headquarters nous Jesse pour un petit moment c'est ici dans Kai Concit et puis nous ka espérer activité avec motion continuer ici.
Okay. Just want to note the arrival of the Senator, the Honorable Herman Francis, the Minister for Home Affairs, Justice and National Security. I believe we're only missing one more Senator's arrival, and of course the go-ahead from the Speaker of the House, sorry, my apologies, the go-ahead from the President of the Senate as we begin this morning's proceedings. Again, coming off of the very feverish debate we had in the House of Representatives on Tuesday and going into the wee hours of Wednesday morning, we will be seeing the continuation of debate. The senators making their contribution to the petition of the Honorable Prime Minister and Minister for Finance to extend the state of emergency in St. Lucia. And if I could just quote the Honorable Prime Minister, the simple fact is that the state of the emergency allows the government of St. Lucia to move swiftly between phases, especially as the virus evolves. And it would not be possible moving swiftly and responding to the effects of the virus, especially in St. Lucia. We know there are triggers that will advance us into new phases, triggers that will revert us to previous phases. In this case, we're seeing going into phase 4 and being in phase 3 right now. Should we have a cluster of 30 cases in St. Lucia, we would have to go back to the command center to get new word on what the decision would be if we need to revert to a previous phase where perhaps there was a longer stretch of a curfew here on island to reduce the transition of COVID-19 here on island, keep people at home as much as possible. But as we begin to open up the country as well, as we begin to resume economic activity, open our borders, we're seeing the phased reopening of school in the case of a very careful, cautious reopening of in-class instruction. We're hearing from the Ministry of Health and Wellness, even as they engage the grade 6s and the form 5s in their preparation for common entrance and CSEC respectively, that it will be, very stringent measures will be taken, and calling on a society, Joe public, to ensure that they do their part in it as we seek to further enhance the very stringent measures and protocols that have been put in place to protect the population. We need to find a way. We cannot remain, if I could again quote the Honorable Prime Minister, we cannot continue to exist in a bubble. Safety, hygiene and economic stability will be even more important in designing the post-lockdown world. And so that is the rationale for the extension of the state of emergency for another 4-month period, for the government of St. Lucia to move with the very fluid nature of the effects of COVID-19, not only in St. Lucia, but in the world. And just to give you the assurance also that the government of St. Lucia is moving according to the word of the Operations Command Center and the chief among them being the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Sharon Belmont George, and they are, of course, getting information being trickled down from the World Health Organization. So the government of St. Lucia is heavily reliant on scientific data, the scientific information, and seeking the advice based on such from the Chief Medical Officer in our specific experience in our population at this time.
And just rightly so, one observation we would definitely note on either side of the house, Jesse, we would see that we are in agreement that the Command Center is doing a good job. There's no doubt about that, and we have seen, as elsewhere, we have seen appreciation for our frontline workers and for the good job that they are doing. Notably, also, we have to say, when it comes to taking the decisions, it is quite clear, and we have heard it here over and over again repeatedly, that as it relates to the decision making that is left to the Command Center, of course, who has the Command Center, of course, when it comes to giving the information,
those are providing guidance,
the logistics, saying where we are, and taking into consideration a 14-day period in which they could take into consideration what the figures are saying as it relates to COVID.
As we move from phase to phase,
you understand, especially as we move from phase to phase. So the on that. The other observation we have to say is the Prime Minister did indicate, as we have been doing, we move accordingly, and if needs be, and we have to go back, we know what the triggers are, and of course that was made clear at the consultation. Encore, nous a dit nous voulons public là avec citoyens simplici. Là venu pour manière bagaille lever ces décisions. Premier ministre et puis cabinet li ka prend en chaisani pour venir et puis conseil qui a sorti centre commande là. Et puis ça c'est sur directive 6 mois parmi l'autre. Donc ils savent là dans 14 jours, il y a toujours qu'à prendre en considération qui ça qui a fait côté nous et qui manière bagaille là. C'est bien important. L'autre bagaille le premier ministre là parmi raison il bail pour demander parmi ces motions il présenter ici à ajouter état de secours. Raison pour ça encore il a dit bagaille en place en tous les cas. Nous sommes en situation côté nous Covid vie élevé tête li nous ni pour date qui nous ça préparer nous préparer pour lui et puis nous ni bagaille qui en place pour faire assurer nous adresser situation. Il aussi dit là il vient pour situation si nous bagaille vini primaire nous pas même briser aller 4 mois en état de secours. On a pas dit temps nous espérons ici pour tout membre Sénat là nous va continuer de rester en écoute puis nous va avoir information encore changer nous va mener rapport nous hard kai concite nous va mener rapport hard kai concite et nous va bien content si au point temps pour écouter et puis participer ensemble et puis nous. Jesse.
Thank you for that. Just to let you know, we are in the final iteration of phase 3 of our response to COVID-19, and that is the mitigation phase. Into come the first week of June, our full resumption of economic activity, the full resumption of societal activity here in St. Lucia, and that would include the essential and non-essential services as well as religious, gyms and exercise, sporting, bars, functions, cinemas, border opening, returning nationals, regional travel, international travel, hotel sites and attractions. So the hope is that by the first week of June that we can resume and have the full reopening of our society. Of course, if you were following the assessment by the Command Center, that was the national consultation conducted about 2 weeks ago on the framework to reopen St. Lucia society, you would have heard the outline of how us moving from phase 3 to phase 4 will work out. Of course, so far in the last 2 weeks, the government of St. Lucia gave the all clear for businesses to open, not having to seek permission from the requisite ministries and the requisite agencies through which these businesses have been registered. But however, to the COVID-19 website, you could see the specific protocols, the protocols that are specific to each sector that the businesses must adhere to as we reopen our country at this time. You can go to the website covid19response.lc to get all of the information you need. If you have a business, if you have an office, if you're running a bar, if you're not a bar, if you're running a salon, if you're running a restaurant, there are protocols that have been outlined that you need to adhere to in order to reopen. And I've been to a few salons, barbershops, and I've seen how they are making preparations, and everybody is trying to ensure that they keep in accordance with the protocols as outlined by the authorities to ensure that as people and patrons come to their businesses that they can accommodate them in the safest way possible at this time. We know COVID-19 is no joke, and the to reduce any at this time is essential to ensure that St. Lucia can continue on track and continue to live and learn and perfect, I dare say, the idea of learning to live with COVID-19 here on island.
Definitely, Jesse, I'm glad that you brought up that observation. We could recall speaking to Ms. Ngozi, and one of the Ngozi, and one of the observations she made and her statement was that everyone has to take that personal responsibility. While we could see we have 100% recovery rate, I think it's very important that everyone take that responsibility. Of course, starting with you doing what you can do, your masks, being aware, the washing of the hands, of course, following protocols, the social distancing, encouraging persons. If you show any signs of the virus, you could, take actions. The directive to direct you to the clinics, is so important. Of course, we say staying at home also is very important when it relates to COVID. Et puis, nous avons dit, c'est un bagage qui est bien important pour nous changer. Pas du temps, nous avons dit, nous avons couvert 100%. Avec nous avons pièces, monde qui est testé pour COVID dans 24 jours. La dernière fois, nous avons un monde qui testé positif, c'est le 3 mai, le 3e jour en mai. Quand nous avons 24 jours côté, nous avons une pièce depuis COVID. Mais ce qui est bien important, c'est nous avons CMO, nous avons les autorités, bureau qui est responsable pour santé, nous avons ça pas veut dire nous panique COVID. Et quand nous avons retourné graduellement, nous avons pays à vie ouvert, mis à présent, en ceci maintenant qui vient, nous avons l'école qui a vie ouvert, expressement c'est maman qui a fait command entrance et puis CXC, tout le monde a protocole. Personnellement, pour changer les venus pour faire ça ou ça fait pour empêcher ici manger. Nous pouvons une pièce de guérison pour les affaires Covid là. Et puis nous travaillons pour faire assurer nous pas si main. Nous avons l'autre côté quand les gens sont morts en la terre, nous avons quand les gens qui sont morts les venus pour Covid. Il est important que nous avions dit encore combien de Jesse place qu'on a coupé chivé, nous avons c'est chaque place business, on a vu un travail, nous avons c'est mon ça qui fait paillou, qui a mis des bagages pour sanité la main, sanitiser la main, nous avons demandé pour masque là, ou bien et bien après ça monsieur nous avons président Sénat la Patrick, nous avons commencé l'activité ici.
Let us pray.
Almighty God, we just want to thank you for your goodness and your love and kindness towards us. We thank you for your graciousness and your mercy. We ask of you, God, that you'll continue covering over us as a nation. We ask for a special petition at this time that you would cause your rain, the floodgates of heaven to be open to mitigate the drought that is in this land. Let your blessings be with us. We ask for the covering of your precious blood over this land. Almighty God, by whom alone kings reign, and princes decree justice, and from whom alone cometh all counsel, wisdom and understanding. We, thy unworthy servants, here gathered together in thy name, do most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our consultation, and grant that we have thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interests, prejudices, partial affection, the result of all our counsel may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the Queen, the public will, peace, and tranquility of St. Lucia, and the united and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity, one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. And the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Ghost be with us all forever. Amen.
Announcements. Good morning, Senators. Ms. Joyce O'Geist, eminent folklorist, pioneer in the production and recording of our folk music, choir master, researcher, and author, cultural ambassador, sportswoman par excellence, outstanding St. Lucian, and exemplary daughter of the soil, has passed away. Senators, please join me in extending condolences to the family and friends of the late Joyce O'Geist. Statements from ministers. She said that already. Honorable Minister responsible for culture and creative industries.
Thank you, Madam Minister. Thank you, Madam President. I note your expression of condolences to the family of Joyce O'Geist, but as Minister of Culture, I'm prepared to make a statement with respect to her work. And on Thursday, 21st of May, 2020, Madam President, our nation received the sad news of her passing. One of our most celebrated, multi-talented, passionate, and experienced leaders in culture, arts, and sports. Joyce, as she was affectionately called, was a sportswoman, a musician, a music educator, a cultural activist, a music icon, and music researcher extraordinaire. In a career that spanned over 6 decades, she made our country proud. She passed away at her residence in Arundel Hill in Marshall Castries. Miss O'Geist was a founding member of the Huronora Voices, a musical group which was founded in 1970. She also published many St. Lucian songs. In addition, Joyce produced a number of documentaries for radio, the most prominent being the music program for schools broadcasts, which introduced primary school students to the rudiments of music and to St. Lucia music and folklore. This radio broadcast was very popular among school children and adults alike, and I'm sure most of us in here benefited from the programming. The popularized anthem for every school child in the era that I'm speaking about, today we remember it as Walk, Walk, Running, Walk. This is what we all knew Joyce O'Geist to be teaching us. She was a mentor who impacted the lives and careers of many of our citizens, particularly our sportspersons, our musicians, our artists, both here and abroad. She was the youngest netballer to play for St. Lucia in 1960. Only 14 years old, she made a national team. Indies team and also played for the Commonwealth team against England in 1966. She was the recipient of several awards, several prestigious awards, including becoming St. Lucia's first Sportswoman of the Year in 1969, and in the end, becoming a member of the Order of the British Empire in 2017. In the coming days, Madam President, our institutions, the Cultural Development Foundation, the Folk Research Center, the St. Lucia Netball Association, and the Department of Creative Industries will unveil plans for the celebration of the life of our sports icon and, of course, our cultural icon, Ms. Denise Joyce Ogis. We extend heartfelt condolences to her family and, of course, the sports and cultural fraternity on her passing. I thank you.
Papers to be laid. Honorable Minister for Health and Wellness and Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to lay the following papers standing in my name. Statutory Instrument Number 60 of 2020, Constitution of St. Lucia, Extension of Resolution of Parliament approving Declaration of State of Emergency. Statutory Instrument Number 61 of 2020, St. Lucia Parliament Proclamation Proroguing Parliament. Statutory Instrument Number 62 of 2020, St. Lucia Parliament Appointment of Session of Parliament. Statutory Instrument Number 63 of 2020, Emergency Powers, Disasters, COVID-19, Curfew Number 6 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 64 of 2020, National Insurance Corporation, Economic Relief Program for COVID-19 Regulations. Statutory Instrument Number 65 of 2020, Price Control Amendment Number 6 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 66 of 2020, Excise Tax Amendment of Schedule 1, Number 6 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 67 of 2020, Finance Administration Procurement and Stores Amendment Regulations. Statutory Instrument Number 68 of 2020, Emergency Powers, Disasters, COVID-19 Curfew, Number 6 Amendment Order. Statutory Instrument Number 69 of 2020, St. Lucia National Insurance Corporation, Bois-d'Orange Development Project Vesting Order. Statutory Instrument Number 70 of 2020, Alien Land Holding Licensing Regulations. Statutory Instrument Number 71 of 2020, International Business Companies, Declaration of Head Office Company, Grow Resources St. Lucia Inc. Order. Statutory Instrument Number 72 of 2020, National Insurance Corporation, Sickness Benefit COVID-19 Regulations. Statutory Instrument Number 73 of 2020, Citizenship by Investment Amendment Regulations. Statutory Instrument Number 74 of 2020, Emergency Powers, Disasters, COVID-19, Curfew Number 7 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 75 of 2020, Water and Sewage, Water-Related Emergency Declaration Order. Statutory Instrument Number 76 of 2020, Price Control Amendment Number 7 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 77 of 2020, Excise Tax Amendment of Schedule 1, Number 7 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 78 of 2020, Price Control Amendment Number 7 Order. Estimates of Revenue and Expenditure 2020-2021, Economic and Social Review 2019, National Insurance Corporation Annual Report July 2017 to June 2018, St. Lucia Bureau of Standards Annual Report 2017-2018, Banana Industry Trust Corporation financial statements for the year ending March 31st, 2019, expressed in Eastern Caribbean dollars.
Motions, Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move the following motion standing in my name. Whereas it is provided by Section 17(1) of the Constitution of St. Lucia, Cap 101, that the Governor General may, by proclamation which shall be published in the Gazette, declare that a state of emergency exists for the purposes of Chapter 1 of Constitution of St. Lucia, Cap 101, and whereas it is further provided by Section 17(3) of the Constitution of St. Lucia, Cap 101, that the declaration of emergency shall last, A, in the case of a declaration made when Parliament is sitting, at the expiration of a period of 7 days, beginning with the date of publication of the declaration, and B, in any other case, at the expiration of a period of 21 days, beginning with the date of publication of the declaration, unless it has in the meantime been approved by resolutions of the Senate and the House. And whereas it is further provided by Section 17(6) of the Constitution of St. Lucia, Cap 101, that a resolution of the Senate or the House passed for the purposes of Section 17 shall remain in force for 12 months or such shorter period as may be specified in the resolution. B, a resolution under paragraph A may be extended from time to time by a further resolution, each extension not exceeding 12 months from the date of the resolution effecting the extension. And whereas the Governor General, by proclamation, declared a state of emergency that was published in the Gazette on the 23rd day of March 2020 as statutory instrument number 39 of 2020, containing a declaration that the public emergency has arisen as a result of the occurrence of COVID-29 nCoV, an infectious disease commonly known as COVID-19, and whereas the declaration of emergency is made when Parliament is sitting and will expire at the end of a period of 7 days beginning with the date of publication of the declaration, unless the declaration is approved by resolutions of the Senate and the House. And whereas Parliament approved the declaration of state of emergency that was published in the Gazette on the 23rd day of March 2020 as statutory instrument number 39 of 2020, containing a declaration that a public emergency has arisen as a result of the occurrence of 2019 nCoV, an infectious disease commonly known as COVID-19, for a further period of 26 days, commencing from the 31st day of March 2020 and ending on the 26th day of April 2020 by the Constitution of St. Lucia, resolution of Parliament approving declaration of state of emergency passed as statutory instrument number 40 of 2020. And whereas Parliament extended for an additional period commencing from the 27th day of April 2020 and ending on the 31st day of May 2020, in accordance with Section 17(6) of the Constitution of St. Lucia, Cap 101, the Constitution of St. Lucia resolution of Parliament approving declaration of state of emergency passed as statutory instrument number 40 of 2020 that approved the state of emergency that was published in the Gazette on the 23rd day of March 2020 as statutory instrument number 39 of 2020, containing a declaration that a public emergency has arisen as a result of the occurrence of 2019 nCoV, an infectious disease commonly known as COVID-19, for a further period of 26 days, commencing from the 31st day of March 2020 and ending on the 26th day of April 2020. And whereas it is necessary to further extend for an additional period, commencing from the 1st day of June 2020 and ending on the 30th day of September 2020, in accordance with Section 17(6) of the Constitution of St. Lucia, Cap 101, the Constitution of St. Lucia, extension of resolution of Parliament approving declaration of state of emergency, passed as statutory instrument number 60 of 2020, that extended the state of emergency for an additional period commencing from the 27th day of April 2020 and ending on the 31st day of May 2020. Be it resolved that Parliament further extends for an additional period commencing from the 1st day of June 2020 and ending on the 30th day of September 2020 in accordance with Section 17(6) of the Constitution of St. Lucia, Cap 101, the Constitution of St. Lucia, extension of resolution of Parliament approving declaration of state of emergency, passed as statutory instrument number 60 of 2020, that extended the state of emergency for an additional period commencing from the 27th day of April 2020 and ending on the 31st day of May 2020. The resolution before us, Madam President, is requesting an extension of the resolution of Parliament approving the declaration of state of emergency passed as statutory instrument number 60 of 2020 to extend the state of emergency that currently exists for an additional period commencing from the 1st day of June 2020 and ending on the 30th day of September 2020. This extension is necessary, Madam President, as the pandemic declared by the World Health Organization in February of this year still continues. Madam President, what is more alarming is the fact that the death toll for COVID-19 continues to increase. And as of Wednesday, May 27, 2020, WHO Coronavirus Disease Dashboard reported 5,491,678 confirmed cases of coronavirus and 349,190 deaths around the world. We are aware that cases of COVID-19 deaths continue to rise in many countries globally, Madam President. However, locally, we continue to report 18 cases, all of whom have recovered. We currently have 141 persons in quarantine, 29 persons in isolation, and we have had no deaths on island so far. We have conducted 964 tests, and as of today, we are at our 27th day free of COVID-19 without any positive cases. However, to date, Madam President, there is no cure. And in spite of our success in containing the virus, the prediction is that we will experience additional waves of the virus. Consequently, Madam President, we are indicating the phases through which we will be reopening our country and our borders in such a way that we implement public health and safety measures to prevent, contain, and maintain transmission if needs be. We have also continued to conduct community testing on a regular basis. Madam President, we have been receiving our nationals who were stranded on cruise ships all around the world, and they are coming back home in large numbers because we have insisted on removing them from those cruise ships just sitting in the waters, in foreign waters at that. We insisted on bringing our people back home. The first set of over 300, Madam President, were quarantined for 14 days, and that ended last weekend. Another set has arrived to date, and not one has tested positive for the coronavirus. So we can continue to knock on wood, Madam President. However, we are not out of the woods yet. Madam President, in the coming week, we have proposed a return to school for our grade 6 and from 5 students in preparation for their examinations. During that week, we shall also be reopening our national borders to travelers in the upcoming weeks. Madam President, St. Lucia has performed exceptionally outstanding during the initial stages of this pandemic, and our success is due to the steps that were taken from the time that WHO made the declaration that COVID-19 is a pandemic. Permit me, Madam President, to reiterate our Prime Minister's words to explain the chronology of events which has led us to the safe place that we are in today. And I quote, Madam President, "This success has much to do with the declaration of the state of emergency. Our government's early planning and preparation undertaken by the tireless efforts of our essential service workers and the willingness of our fellow St. Lucians to adhere to the protocols put in place over the past few weeks also cemented our accomplishments. Madam President, through consultation with industry and health experts," he continued, "the opposition, public and private sector, the government of St. Lucia carefully implemented various strategies in combating the effects of COVID-19. This took the form of the creation of a command center, the declaration of a state of emergency on March 23, 2020, closing of our borders, the distribution of care packages to the vulnerable population, strengthening of security and health forces, the imposition of curfews, the closure of non-essential businesses, the identification and designation of adequate quarantine facilities, and most importantly, Madam President, the opening of the OKEU hospital to facilitate the transformation of VH into our respiratory care center." End of quote. Madam President, no one could have said it better than our Prime Minister, who himself worked tirelessly up to this day, night and day, to ensure that our country and all our citizens remain safe. Not only did our Prime Minister work round the clock, but he actually put his own self at risk to the point where I insisted on him getting tested for the virus himself. Thank God the test came out negative. Madam President, allow me to outline the strategies that were implemented by the government of St. Lucia in the fight against COVID-19 to date. January 31st, the National Health Security Committee was activated. On February the 28th, we activated our National Emergency Management Advisory Committee, NEMA. On March the 16th, the 311 call center was activated to receive calls on COVID-19. On March the 18th, we established the command center for operations and set up the information headquarters at GIS for factual information dissemination. March 20th, we began the processing of our quarantine facilities. March 23rd, we had our first declaration of state of emergency by the Governor General, and the following day, Parliament approved the extension of the state of emergency for a further period of 26 days. At the same time, Parliament approved the Emergency Powers Disaster COVID-19 Order. This allowed the competent authority to implement protective measures such as the closure of borders, cancellation of all mass crowd events, and a curfew from 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. March 23rd, Madam President, we commenced testing for COVID-19. March 26th, 113 Cuban medical professionals arrived in St. Lucia. March 27th, we fully transitioned OKEU Hospital and designated VH as a respiratory center. On April 1st, Madam President, a 24-hour curfew was implemented, and NEMO began immediate mobilization for the distribution of care packages. On April 29th, our government announced our social stabilization program. Madam President, these are just some of the major steps that were taken to enable us to fight this virus. At a time when world leaders are calling for solidarity throughout the world to fight the virus, we cannot let our guard down just because we have had these successes. We must ensure that we have the cooperation of every organization, agency, man, woman, and child. Because the negative social and economic impact of COVID-19 will be with us for a very long time. As we establish the new normal, Madam President, civil society must understand that we are all in this together. Extending the state of emergency is a necessary precautionary measure that can be discontinued at any point in time if it becomes necessary to do so. It is also a necessity in case an emergency situation arises where government must take steps to change the times of the curfew or to shut down our borders for preservation of life and protection of country. WHO also continues to recommend that all countries should still be on their highest level of alert. Our Chief Medical Officer has also informed us that although we have flattened our curve, as we lift the public health and social measures that were implemented to contain and reduce transmission, we anticipate the resurgence of cases with the opening of our borders, as most countries remain in active infection. She also indicated that our population remains susceptible to COVID-19, so the risk of transmission once introduced is very likely. Based on the current evidence, Madam President, it is envisaged that as we progress and move from one phase to another, we will experience recurring epidemic waves with continuous low-level transmission. Therefore, our efforts must ensure we maintain the waves as low and manageable as possible so as not to overwhelm our healthcare system. This would require an efficient system to ensure the rapid implementation of measures which the state of emergency allows. This includes the curfew, use of zones if necessary, or any scale-back measures. Madam President, I know that there are concerns about extending the state of emergency. However, we have had prior extensions, and we have remained within the confines of the extensions, only using them for the intended purpose, that is to save and protect lives. This virus is very dynamic, and at times it presents challenges that must be dealt with swiftly and expeditiously. The state of emergency allows us to move quickly from one phase to the next to facilitate this new normal. Many of the measures that we are able to put in place were facilitated under the state of emergency. It is my belief, Madam President, that we will be required to be more vigilant as we navigate through the remainder of phase 3, where we are currently, and the other upcoming phases 4 and 5, where there is more focus on opening up our country and borders and dealing with any potential fallout and the new normal. Madam President, COVID-19 has crushed and crashed our country and our people. Our main revenue source is no more. And since this is a global catastrophe, there is nowhere we can turn for help. So we must make the ultimate sacrifice and help ourselves and each other as best we can. As a result of this desperate situation, we must remain in a state where government is given the latitude to act quickly, if needs be, in the interest of the country to maintain stability, safety, and health. At a time, Madam President, when world leaders are calling for solidarity to confront COVID-19, and we are not aware of any country that imposes a state of emergency, calling to remove that state of emergency at this point in time, especially not in our region, where most of our Caribbean states are grappling with protocols that would have to be put in place in order to reopen our borders. It is with this in mind, Madam President, that I support this resolution, and I present it to my fellow senators in this honorable House for their support. I thank you.
Senators, the question is that Parliament further extend for an additional period commencing from the first day of June 2020 and ending the 30th September 2020 in accordance with Section 17(6) of the Constitution of St. Lucia, Cap 1.01. The Constitution of St. Lucia. Extension of resolution of Parliament approving declaration of state of emergency passed as statutory instrument number 60 of 2020 that extended the state of emergency for an additional period commencing from the 27th day of April 2020 and ending on the 31st day May 2020. Honorable Leader of Opposition Business.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning, Senators. Madam President, before I speak to this motion, I just wish to just share for my own inspiration a Psalm 149, 23, 24, which, when I read into your hearing, Madam President, search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me and lead me in the way everlasting. Madam President, just in a mere response to the presentation I've heard from the leader of government business and understanding the difficulty in coming to this honorable house to seek for an extension of the state of emergency powers of the government. And as she mentioned, as the member mentioned, the issue of testing, I reflected and asked myself, Madam President, if we had the means of testing sincerity in this honorable house, whether it would have added more value to this debate, a test of sincerity. Madam President, the state of emergency is a situation in which is empowered to perform actions or impose policies that it would normally not be permitted to undertake. Madam President, somewhere I read that the states of emergency can also be used as a rationale or pretext for suspending rights and freedoms guaranteed under a country's constitution. Madam President, there are many St. Lucians that do not understand what is meant by a state of emergency or what rights they are relinquishing to the government or the executive. Madam President, just in terms of a summary, the Constitution of St. Lucia, the supreme law, secures our fundamental rights and freedoms. Liberty, the person, equality before the law, freedom of conscience, of expression, of assembly and association, protection of family, personal privacy, privacy of one's home, protection from slavery, protection from arbitrary search, freedom of movement. Madam President, as some of the freedoms and rights as enshrined in our Constitution for St. Lucians. What is meant by a state of emergency, Madam President, is for a St. Lucian to relinquish some of those fundamental basic rights to the executive. Madam President, and as I reflect on it in the the authority, maybe the police, in that regard can detain you for a specific period without an explanation, maybe 7 days, as I reflected on the Constitution. Your home can be searched without a warrant. You can be removed. You can ask not to congregate. These are some of those fundamental rights. Madam President, it is understood generally by St. Lucians that the government must act quickly in an emergency, and some leniency, or what we consider to be restriction of personal liberties, is given as it relates to the government actions. And of course, it is during some times of crisis, as was mentioned, natural disasters, civil unrest, armed conflict, pandemic or epidemic, or even some biosecurity reasons. And that this must be done in good faith for the preservation of public health, safety, or order. And therefore, Madam President, it is in that vein that the patriotic opposition, with a caring leader, supported the government in the early request, or not to question, or remain at peace in the first request of the state of emergency, and even, I think it was asked for a second time, 26 days. However, Madam President, the government cannot arbitrarily liberties that don't and do not have a legitimate purpose. And therefore, after listening, Madam President, to the Prime Minister yesterday and observing the silence of the entire cabinet was represented in the lower house, as if they were saying to the Prime Minister, I cannot add my voice to yours in that regard, but I can only say yes if it matters. I am concerned, Madam President, about the extension of the state of emergency powers. Why move from 26 days to 122 days? Madam President, what is interesting, I didn't hear the Prime Minister state or cite how did the state of emergency earlier on specifically contributed success. How did it contribute success to what has been achieved thus far as it relates to our fight on COVID-19? What were the specific situation of success that can be attributed to the state of emergency? Madam President, understanding also that some of the provisions mentioned, or some of the powers under the state of emergency, that also is available under the Public Health Act and also under the Quarantine Act. I'm asking why a state of emergency? Madam President, in a society where the perception is that the poor people are not treated as under the law as same as those who are well, how comfortable and how relaxed can I be, or members of the opposition be, as it relates to the state of emergency in this time, in this environment, and without justification being presented and the silence by other members of the lower house? Madam President, it's also very much concerning that the police, who is an authority in administering a state of emergency, Madam President, it is very uncomfortable when the Prime Minister refers to the police as my police, And when the Prime Minister's wife is also a patron of the police force, it is worrying for me, Madam President. The police cannot have a patron. The police, no one can appear to be giving gifts to the police. It is concerning. Madam President, must be seen to be totally independent as far as I'm concerned. Madam President, like the Treasury that is without money, so are the hearts of many St. Lucians with no more trust of this government. And in the context of the Prime Minister's presentation and the silence of his members of cabinet, clearly there isn't any justification for the state of emergency. Madam President, I wouldn't be surprised if the 5 members or the 5 senators on this side, I think they're the only quintuplets left of the UWPs who would say otherwise. But Madam President, there is a serious concern. Without rehashing, Madam, the chronology or the sequences that led to where we are today, I know the question that was asked in former sitting is, has there been an abuse of power? Has there been an abuse of power? And Madam President, I can comfortably say, yes, there has been. And you dare ask, Madam President, what has been the abuse of power? Madam President, I was shocked and saddened by the demolition of the old prison during the state of emergency. I'll tell you why, Madam President. Madam President, when I did my master's thesis in London, I had to choose an elective, and I did history of architecture. Myself and my cousin in London, South Bank University. And Madam President, whereas I did architecture, drafting at Sir Arthur Lewis, I did some technology when I did my degree in Jamaica. Selecting history of architecture as an elective among a number of Europeans had me to be exposed to some things that we take for granted. Madam President, in doing my final to get out of university at my master thesis, Madam President, we had to select a very old cathedral that was only available somewhere in Scotland and somewhere in France, the age of that, for us to do our final thesis. My cousin and I were there together. We decided we don't want to do a group approach, and we decided that we couldn't travel this far and decided to do St. Paul's Cathedral. Madam President, it exposed me to a lot. I had the opportunity to go into the archives in London and revisit the old sermons that were preached back then in the 1200s, understanding the issues of the design and why it was set up, Madam President. But more amazing, Madam President, during those lectures, when the lecturer would ask the question, how many of you have visited the Wall of China? And I saw so many hands of the Europeans went up. How many of you have visited the Great Pyramid of Giza? I saw so many hands, and I said, wow, where am I from? A different part of this world. And I knew, Madam President, then, that there is something special about old. But I was able to connect it, Madam President, to something more beautiful. I grew up with my great-grandmother and my grandmother. And every time, Madam President, we had to distinguish between my great-grandmother and my grandmother and my sister, we ask, who is calling? They say, old mommy. Because my great-grandmother was called old mommy. Not old because she was derelict. She was one of the most loving. We almost preferred her more than our grandmother who whipped us. She was dark and tall. Madam President, when I listened to the debate and the discussion about the prison, I asked, would St. China demolish the Great Wall of China, which is just a wall? Would they have demolished, if they were Egyptians, the Great Pyramid of Giza? Madam President, this building out there, 24 inches thick wall out of clay bricks. And my engineering experience tells me it survived fire, hurricanes, and floods. there before some of the buildings that are in Castries. One of the last buildings left. Of an interesting story. We could not see value in it because old for us means useless and wasted. I do not blame a lot of my St. Lucians for sometimes referring to the old lady in the way that they say, the old lady, the old building. But Madam President, only yesterday I sat in a barber's shop right across Saucy Road, and I tell the barber, attention, I tell him, look at a window across the road from an old building, Madam President. It had the wooden louvers and it had the shutters. These windows and shutters, Madam President, secured us from hurricanes, some of which we don't even appreciate. We buy what we call Chinese windows, and they call it hurricane shutters, and the glass break. But the wooden windows with the shutters and the louvers at the back, as most of the buildings in Castries, are so valuable. Valuable. And Madam President, as I put my own valuation surveying skills to this, I would tell you, Madam President, we could not even purchase it. So you ask me, Madam President, has there been an abuse? 10,000 square foot of asset in this heart of the city of Castries? Of course, Madam President. And when I listened to the explanation or the non-explanation for such demolition, I was even appalled, Madam President. Was there a contract? Is there a contract to build a new one? I asked myself those questions. But more important, Madam President, I just wish to, just a short statement. This is really a standard building contract, Madam President, which is used in London, across the world, in the Commonwealth. And Madam President, there is a clause they call antiquities. And it says, and I just wish this, it's a standard form of contract, all fossils, antiquities, and other objects of interest or value which may be found on a site or in excavating the same during the progress of the work shall become the property of the employer, and upon discovery of such an object, the contractor shall forthwith cease the works. This is a basic British standard form of contract for works, meaning that when you are implementing works and you come across something, you stop. Value is there. If the foundations, Madam President, of this building was not seen and works were being undertaken, and the contractor, according to the JCT form of contract, joint tribunal committee of contractors, that they came across that foundation, they automatically would have to stop. Value, because it becomes the property of the employer. Madam President, the superstructure was there, not just the foundation, the superstructure. But we've put a bulldozer and we demolished 24 inches thick brick wall. Madam President, there are no expertise to reproduce that in St. Lucia currently. We do not have the means of doing it. That is an abuse. So, Madam President, I ask the question, what are we doing with such powers of emergency? How do you trust a government under the dark clouds of the state of emergency would demolish such an asset belonging to the state? Madam President, it pains me to think of this. And this is pure professional. And I listened to the discussion, Madam President, of persons calling it an old building. And I said, my goodness, we have a lot of work to do with our people, Madam President. A lot of work. At our educational level, Madam President, it's sad that we cut the support or subvention of the National Trust in that regard. But they would have a lot of work to do in terms of educating our populace and how we relate to our environment. Madam President, we've come to a point post-COVID where all we have is what is ours, what is St. Lucian. We have nothing left. Madam President, I have envisaged as a professional and expect that some commercial properties will go down in value because some churches have become smaller. Some hotels have become smaller based on the new COVID protocols. I read somewhere that it is now 30 square feet per person to now congregate in a church. I saw some small congregations as I drove by. I said, oh, they're going to be 2 persons, one probably in the middle and maybe someone at the door. And woe be unto those persons who believe the establishment of small buildings they call church were actually churches because there's no room to congregate. This is the new normal. So these properties designed as churches are no longer churches for the intended purposes, and of course would be devalued. A hotel which was designed to accommodate 500 guests with new protocol, how many can it accommodate? It has been devalued. You know what has increased in value, Madam President? Agricultural properties. Because food security is the new talk. And recently there, when I went to Renwick, all compost was completely sold out. None. Everybody, there's a demand to go into agriculture all of a sudden. And whereas, Madam President, I reflect on it, there may be a silver lining in this. So I ask the leaders of this country, the government, and even with the opposition, how do we respond in such a times? I do not think it and build on the foundation that has been established. We have the skilled person, Madam President. We have architects in St. Lucia who have been all over the world to be trained to know how to incorporate these things into a new buildings. And the other part of it, Madam President, is the maintenance. Oh, Madam President, we build these new waterfront buildings up there, Madam President. I worked in them. I had to work with the government to maintain them. Madam President, they're so expensive to maintain. These buildings, the barracks, are cheaper to maintain. Cheaper. And I said, what's wrong with us? We call it old. Madam President, on Manuel Street, there was a building built with the modern technology of steel frame with the in-core, what you call what stabilizes this building is really an in-core of an elevator shaft going up. It had to be demolished. These buildings could have remained there, Madam President. The waterfront buildings would have been demolished before them. Because there are buildings of that quality that are over 500 years old in London. There's some that are over 1,000 years. But we call it old and we demolish it. Such an abuse. Madam President, assuming that persons who did that you didn't know better, I ask the question, what do we do? Madam President, in my own mind, in my humble opinion to what is before us at this point in time, we need to strengthen the civil society. We need to strengthen those organizations that is part and contribute to our commonwealth, the wealth of St. Lucia. We need to respect and honor them. We need to invest in them. When the National Trust speak on behalf of saving what's there, they're not advancing their cause. They're contributing to another lockbox of the wealth of St. Lucia. Our assets, our heritage. That lockbox is very important, Madam President. So, Madam President, as I say my last view on this, I'm asking, if the worst supposedly has passed, if, as the leader of government business indicated, that we are now in a safe place, and I quote her. And when Madam Leader of Government Business indicated that we are now in a safe place, I quickly looked up the definition of safe. Protected from or not exposed to risk or likely harm. If we have reached a safe place, why are we extending the state of emergency from 26 days to 122 days? What is the motive? Madam President, and if the worst has not left us, why are we opening up to other jurisdictions based on the own pronouncement made by the Leader of Government Business? Madam President, during the height of COVID-19, when we were all afraid as to what would become of St. Lucia, what would happen to us, or the government had the latitude. Maybe the leader of the member on the independent member did speak in terms of highlighting the gravity of what was at the time the state of emergency, what powers we were given up. But even the opposition then, not being aware as to what is coming at us, we said, you go have your way, save us if you can. It was just 26 days. Now you say, now we're in the safe zone. You come to this house and ask for 122 days more. Parliamentary oversight of such powers is necessary. Madam President, 4 months, it will be difficult for us to oversee these powers. Madam President, there are other approaches that we adopt to deal with the issue of waves, what we consider waves of COVID. Madam President, public education needs to continue. Madam President, I haven't seen in the presentation made by the Prime Minister what the justification for the 122 days. He indicated that the public has cooperated with the government. Madam President, if St. Lucians have cooperated with the government and have given up their rights, their liberties for 26 days and 26 days, and you say we are now in the safe zone, why continue to restrict them in that way for another 122 days? Madam President, I do not believe, I wouldn't even ask the question. I would not ask the question, has the public not been cooperative? But if not, I would ask what measures should be put in place to achieve further cooperation from the public. But certainly, it wouldn't be a state of emergency. Madam President, what was the benefits? Again, I heard some mentioning of, but it was not clear enough. What are the benefits for further extension, state of emergency? And what is the cost? What is the cost to us? How has it affected us and other St. Lucians? What is that cost to St. Lucians for the state of emergency?
Senator,
what is it?
You have 15 more minutes.
Thank you, Madam President. I will finish within that time. Madam President. Madam President, the Prime Minister also indicated that we remain susceptible. And Madam President, I honestly was trying to understand and still trying to grapple with the issue of the understanding of COVID, as been mentioned by the medical professionals, both here and abroad. I'm saying, if we are susceptible to COVID in the way that is being displayed out there, why open up this country? There is something that is contradicting, Madam President. There is a big contradiction, and this is going to lead us into problems. Let our yea be yea or nay be nay. It's either we are safe or we are not. We cannot send mixed signals to the public. This will create a problem for us, Madam President. And I am, Madam President, and I said it at the last sitting, St. Lucians, we have some things that we all have in common. And I saw it on the morning after curfew when I went to the supermarket. I went there and I saw a line so long, I asked myself why these people came there, but I had to ask myself, what is it I heard I came there? We all interpret things the same way. So all St. Lucians decided to go by the supermarket for a number of days, and the queue was very long. And if you ask yourself, what were you doing there? You're almost not too sure, but all St. Lucians responded to something that they heard. Madam President, I'm saying based on what is happening there, we are sending the wrong signals to St. Lucians, and it will lead to problems. Madam President, there are times as St. Lucians we need to move beyond the mere discussion of Parliament. And we need to search our own heart, our own conscience, and answer some fundamental questions. And this morning, Madam President, I think this is a historical time for us to really put some differences aside, if we can, and respond to some fundamental question as to what is needed, what is necessary. And I ask the members on the government side, do not support an extension of the state of emergency. It is not good for this country at this time. I'm asking the members on the government side, not vote to support. It is not. I'm asking the government side. No, I'm not asking the independent. I'm asking you on the other side. You're directly opposite me. You understand? I'm asking that you do not support this. I thank you, Madam President.
Senator Ferdinand.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning, colleagues. Before I respond or add my voice to the presentation, to the motion on the table, allow me, Madam, to join you and Minister for Culture in expressing condolences to the family of the late cultural activist, Joyce Ogist. I also want to, at this time, acknowledge and extend condolences to a former national footballer and referee. I consider myself a very close member of the football and sports fraternity. Although he had his struggles, but we remember him as a very outstanding footballer and referee in his time. And I speak of Hilary St. Martin, known as Franco, who used to be seen on the boulevard very often, who has been laid to rest. And I express condolences to his family and the football fraternity. I also want to do the same, extend condolences to Brother Romanus Neptune, very close friend and family member, who we lost in the community a couple of weeks ago. This morning, we are here as the Senate to decide whether we are going to give support to the government's decision or proposition to extend the state of emergency from the 4th of June to the 30th of September, a further 4 months. And my colleague described it as another 122 days. We need, as we do so, to recognize, Madam President, that this is a very serious undertaking. This is not something that we just talk about. We have had a state of emergency for a while now, and I think we've all gone through the experience and we've seen how different factions of the society have responded to the situation. At this point, we know that some things are necessary, and the government in situations like this has to make important decisions. But we must be mindful of how the people on the ground, the various sectors of our society are being affected and how they respond, so that we can do what is best in the interest of everyone. I agree that we need to keep our citizens safe, and we need to do whatever we can to maintain that level of assurance among our people. But Madam President, up to last night, the 27th of May, 2020, the Chief Medical Officer, the CMO, by the way, someone I have a lot of regard and respect for, formidable woman. Under these circumstances, we should be very proud that we have such a leader. We have to be. She was on TV last night on the HTS News, indicating that the last 41 cases that were tested within the last 24 days, well, today makes it 25, have all turned out to be negative. And that we have had about 382 cases, although the minister gave a figure that's slightly higher this morning, so I will leave that to be decided on. And she also indicated that since May 3rd, 2020, this year, we have not had a positive case of COVID-19 in our country. So the CMO was reassuring us as a country that so far as a country we've been able to bring some level of control. We've been able to have some measure of confidence in what we're doing, and that the country is doing something to contain the spread of the virus. I think we should all be very pleased with that. Madam President, the problem I have with what's happening is while our CMO is telling us that, as we see, the curve is leveling, that we are beginning to experience some kind of stability regarding this situation, that the government is coming. Now remember, she made that statement last night. And the night or the day before, the government was here, or at least at the lower house, seeking to extend the state of emergency. Now, Madam President, this morning, we are fortunate in this Senate to have the Minister for Health as a leader of government business, who I believe is well placed to address issues relating to public health, if not the best person to do so. And having heard the CMO last night, I came this morning and I said, well, let's listen to how our colleague is going to address this matter as it's presented to the House. Madam President, what I heard from the leader of government business this morning was that it was an indication, and she was again going according to the CMO. According to the CMO, that is what the leader of government business indicated, that if we reopen our borders, and I want to paraphrase a little, she can correct me if I'm not accurate. If we reopen our borders, we anticipate a resurgence of cases. A resurgence of cases. In the words of the Minister for Health, Madam President, sitting in the Senate, as she gave an account of the CMO's advice. If we reopen our borders, we anticipate a resurgence of cases. So, Madam President, if that is what the
leader of government business,
Just on a point of clarification, Madam
Elucidation?
President, Madam Elucidation, what I read was a quote from the CMO, and she gave me that to put in my notes. And I can read it again because it says resurgence. So if I forgot to say it's a quote, it was a quote.
Madam President, that would be necessary. I am quite happy to know that what the minister read was a quote from the CMO. The same CMO that I just referred to as having exhibited or demonstrated exemption in a crisis situation. So it tells us that this CMO knows what she's about. The CMO is not crazy. She knows what she's about. She has advised the minister well. And she's telling the minister, as she has confirmed, she read a quote from the CMO. It's not myself or the opposition that is telling the minister or telling the government that if we reopen the borders, there is likely to be a resurgence of cases. The CMO is saying that to us. Yet, we are here to extend the state of emergency and at the same time, reopen our borders. What is that telling us about our attitude towards the advice of a professional who is competent and has demonstrated outstanding leadership in this country? As a government, what are we saying to our professionals? What are we saying? Is that opinion of any value? Now, if we feel so capable as a government, and that although the CMO has indicated that there's a possibility of resurgence of cases, that we feel we can go ahead, what is it that we have demonstrated that we can do or we can put in place to mitigate against that likelihood? If we really think that we can ignore what the CMO has just said. Madam President, I find it very difficult. There is no logic in what is happening, that the government, the leader of government business as a minister for health, comes to the House, expresses a professional opinion by someone who has demonstrated competence and leadership through a crisis, has helped, because of her leadership, to allow us to experience a level of comfort, a level of stability, where we can say that we have no more cases or no recorded cases for at least 25 days in this country. Yet, we are hell-bent on going ahead with an extended state of emergency and opening up our borders. And opening up our borders to whom? The United States of America. Number one, in terms of cases, deaths in the world. What are we doing? Madam President, it makes no sense. There's no logic. I do not understand it. I do not. I hope that someone on this side will be able to justify or explain this. There is no logic in it. Madam President, if no one else from the lower house, from any other department, I expected to have come to this house to demonstrate some kind of good sense in that regard. I expected it to have been the leader of government business. But I must say, Madam President, that this morning it is actually the worst I've seen in that regard. While we are opening the borders and while we extend the state of emergency, it's telling us that our small business people who own their bars, their snack shops, and as we say in Creole, who have to toll away the little goods and make a little something, they have to be the ones who have all those restrictions to deal with. How could that be equitable? We have a Ministry of Equity and Social Justice in this government. Where is the equity? Now, we behave sometimes as a legislature, which is what we are, that we do things because we have no choice, that our hands are tied and we really have to do it. And sometimes our Prime Minister makes it sound that we have tough decisions to make. Yes, we have tough decisions to make. But let's make those tough decisions using what is available to us. There are two facilities that are available to us. We are behaving in this honorable house as a legislature, Madam President, as if the only way we can manage going forward with the COVID situation, the economy, and stability is by extending a state of emergency. That's how we are positioning ourselves. That's what we are saying. Madam President, as a legislature, that is why I use the word legislature. There is legislation, there is alternative legislation in place that can help us as a government, as a people, to achieve the very same things that we are trying to achieve through a state of emergency extension. And I'll mention 3 examples, Madam President, 3 examples. We already have in place legislation that can assist us, and I speak of, for example, the Quarantine Act. We have a Quarantine Act that is available to us, that we can apply. We also have the Public Health Act. I invite the Minister to check it out. We also have the Disaster Emergency Act. And I think another member of the government, the government side here, has an astute interest in law. Maybe we should look at these. These pieces of legislation exist. Legislation do exist. We have them at our disposal. Why aren't we applying the principles or the powers that they provide us to manage going forward? Why is it that we are hell-bent on having an extension of a state of emergency? So there are options. And I think every St. Lucian will agree that the intention of extending a state of emergency has to be something that is in their best interest. But if they realize that you are doing something, you're taking away all those privileges that my previous colleague spoke about, they are giving up all of this. But what you the power that the extraordinary to the government, the Prime Minister, is being used to do what? When that could have been achieved with other legislation that is already there. So that raises suspicion. It causes people to become very anxious. And there also becomes an issue with trust. Now, Madam President, one of the issues that we will have to face is one of those that the leader of government business raised earlier. It's a very real issue, and it's something that is very close to my heart, having been part of that profession all my life. We know that there is an intention for schools to reopen next week, 4th of June. And we've been in situations in this country before where, whether it was because of a natural disaster or some other difficulty, that teachers make tough decisions when it comes to our students' welfare. There was some time when we had an impasse between the government and the unions, and our teachers had to go back to school, Madam President. And despite their differences, they made the sacrifice on behalf of the students because exams were coming up and they wanted to give the students the best chance of succeeding. Madam President, we have declared that we want to extend the state of emergency. And students, we are now in the month of May, and we have national exams in the form of common entrance. We also have regional exams in the form of CXC, CSEC, KIP. And of course, every parent, every teacher, every St. Lucian who has a child who has to write these exams knows the value and how high stake these exams are. So we believe that a government would be concerned and sensitive to that situation. We want to give our students the best chance of succeeding, give our teachers the best conditions within which, or the best conditions that are available for them to assist the students in succeeding. So I cannot stand here and say that we should or should not reopen school next week. But what I can say is that if during this time, the Ministry of Education, the government has decided that we want to give our students an opportunity to return to school during this COVID-19 situation, during this COVID-19 period, with an extended state of emergency, we need to be prepared to respond to the realities that they face. The leader of government business indicated this morning that we are looking forward to reopening school on Monday. But Madam President, the unions and the teachers have made it very clear that they have legitimate concerns Not Monday, I'm sorry, Tuesday, the 4th of May, right? So the 4th of June, I'm sorry, right, which is next week. Madam President, I stand corrected in terms of the words of the leader of government business, but she alluded to the reopening of school, which is coming up very soon. And I'm saying that as a country, if we are going to ask students and teachers to return to school after such a period, a long period of time, where they've been using e-learning and online facilities, we have to make sure that we are doing it right. Because there isn't much time between now and common entrance. The common entrance exam has been dated, Madam President. It is supposed to be the last week of June. So the students have just about 3 weeks. And we must make sure that these 3 weeks are properly maximized and utilized. We do not want the students to go back into school where the teachers are unhappy, the parents are anxious, the children have all issues, and they are preparing for exams. There is something called test anxiety, and children going to prepare for examinations at 11 years, Madam President, will have a lot of anxiety and pressure on them. With the government, there we are telling people that they should return to work. We have a state of emergency, but we're telling them go back to work, and we want the students to succeed. I want the students to succeed. I want the teachers to do the best they can for the students. But listen to their concerns. So is that state of emergency extension a tool that allows the government, the Prime Minister, and the government to have the teachers, the unions, the trade unions, and their leaders with their hands tied behind their back while the government does whatever it wants? You can't protest. You can't have any form of public gathering, right? No public expression. So if the teachers have had 25 issues that they have raised in writing, you have not addressed any of them, but you're putting them back into the schools. Grade 6 teachers. Madam President, if you go into the secondary school, it's even more complicated. Because if you send the Form 5s to the school, all teachers who teach Form 5 have to be active. Now, whereas in a primary school, you may have one teacher teaching a classroom or a grade, so it may affect 1 or 2 or 3, maybe the special needs person. But in a secondary school, it's more complex. You may have 5 Form 5s, but you may have as many as 20 teachers who have to be interacting with the students, and among whom the work is shared. Have we taken that into consideration? So you may be asking, on average, in our 19 secondary schools, 20 teachers to go back to school where their concerns have not been addressed, and we are in a state of emergency. So the unions can't do anything for them, and they're going back to school. So you put the teachers in a dilemma. They have to choose between their conscience, going back, not having their issues addressed, and having to do, or that they're just not going to go or do something that is unconscionable. And I know our teachers will not do it, Madam President. I was in a classroom for 25 years, plus. I was in a principal's chair for more than 10 years. And I know that our teachers are not like that. They want to do the best they can for the students. It is not fair to put them in that dilemma. It is not fair, Madam President. We know a state of emergency does not allow them to be able to express public opinion. The medium through which they can show their grievances will be taken away from them. And then the concerns that have been expressed legitimately by the unions in writing have not been addressed. But state of emergency continues. Teachers and students go back to school on the 4th of June. Exams high stake. Parents are on their case because they want their children to succeed. The principals and DEOs and the chief education officer and the PS, everybody is looking because they want us, the students, to succeed. We want our country's profile in CXC to remain as it is. But under what conditions are we sending our teachers back to school? And we say we want to extend state of emergency. Have we made any provisions to address the concerns? Madam President, this is a situation that can become very, very volatile. And at this point, as a teacher, as an educator, I believe that my voice is the voice of these people. And they must have a voice. They may not have it on the streets, but I think they have it today in Parliament.
Yeah.
And we need to let people know, our government and all concerned know, that these are not just petty issues. We have 2,000 plus students who are going to face the common entrance this year. We have many more writing CX. We have heard that some of the tertiary level institutions are even asking now that students who are going to apply for matriculation to be enrolled in further in their education submit their Form 4 and maybe Form 3 transcripts to back up what's going on this year, meaning that they are becoming a little bit concerned about the validity and the reliability of the CXCs. That's a serious concern, and yet we are not trying to address it. So, Madam President, I believe that as we go ahead with this extension of state of emergency, the government, the Ministry of Education needs to rethink that situation. Do not put the teachers back into the classroom without addressing their concerns. It is not going to be productive. It will not be. Where you have happy workers, you have productive workers. People are happy at work, they will produce. You don't have to stand behind them with a, you know, as a policeman. They will do their work, but give them the conditions they require. We have issues with water, school safety, student safety. All of these are important. So we need to address that and ensure that all our teachers are comfortable. Madam President, I will now area that is of serious concern. I was watching the news last night, and there was a clip on the regional news that reminded me of something that the Prime Minister said, that he was taking a cue from the regional leaders as he goes ahead to extend the state of emergency. I think it was mentioned previously that Trinidad and Tobago and St. Vincent have not had a state of emergency, but that doesn't necessarily dictate to us what we must do. So we may be neither here or there on that matter. But one thing I realized last night from the news was that the Bajan Prime Minister, who is incidentally the chair of CARICOM, another formidable woman I have a lot of respect for, she made a statement as she addressed concerns about reopening the economy or doing exactly what we want to do. I think that question was posed to her. And you remember, Madam President, Barbados is considered a hub in the region, like Antigua, in terms of the international flights and tourist arrivals. That's a very important part of the economy. So if you're in Barbados or in Antigua, you would have serious concerns now with, closing down your ports and so on. But here's what the Barbadian president said, Prime Minister said. She indicated that they are in no rush. We are in no rush as a country. And that she indicated also that we must govern. I never said that. I never said that. The Barbados Prime Minister indicated that there must be no rush in reopening the economy or in anything we do regarding the arrival of visitors. And she also indicated that whatever we do, in whatever we do, we must ensure that we govern for tomorrow and not for today. That's a very powerful statement. Whatever we are going to do today, we have to think of the implications of tomorrow. And if we govern for today according to her, we may be compromising the very ground on which we stand. And that is why that statement reminded me of what was said in the lower house. Now, Madam President, Barbados clearly is not prepared to put their people at risk. And given the advice of the CMO, who indicated that we may be putting, there may be a resurgence of cases if we reopen our borders, I think we should take heed of these serious, serious warnings. So, Madam President, here we are with a people who are becoming very anxious. Professionals, teachers, regular citizens, hearing that the state of emergency has been extended. They have been under a bit of stress. They are concerned about what's going to happen, but we're going ahead with it. And so what we get out of that, Madam President, is a lot of frustration and people feeling that they're suppressed and feeling that their voice is being taken away from them. And when that happens, you get a reaction. And I'm wondering whether that has something to do with all the barricades that we saw on Tuesday. Is it that the government is fully aware that its actions is sufficiently agitating the people that it feels that it needs to now set up barricades before Parliament? Madam President, on June last year when we came to this house for the opening of Parliament, I was coming here for the first time. When you got outside there, people wanted to hug and kiss and, you know, excitement among the people. They loved what was happening, you know, on both sides. Supporters, people came out and they were, you know, shouting and waving and enjoying the presence of parliamentarians on both sides, particularly the government that had just won the election. Now, in 2016, 4 years later, where are these people? They have been replaced by barricades. They do not want, you do not expect them to want to hug you now and cheer you on, you know. And because of COVID, yes, you may not have been able to hug them, but they would still want to give you a wave. Where are these people? They've been replaced by barricades, Madam President. That is an indication of the mood of the people. And it seems that the government has read that. And I think the only way you can read something like that is if you know that you're contributing to it. So, Madam President, the signs are there that St. Lucians aren't just, you know, okay with this extension. The signs are there. It's not about the opposition. It's not the opposition that the barricades were put out there for, because we were coming to the house. It was not for us. Madam President, finally, I mentioned that there's a that we're not using. But Madam President, I think that after all that I have seen, after all that I have heard, now that I have seen that the chairs have been replaced with boos and the people are speaking out, I think the state of emergency at this point, for me, I'm interpreting it as a tool that is being used by the government to suppress the people, to keep their hands tied behind their backs, as the government does what it wants. The people will not be able to react under normal circumstances. And so, I cannot stand here, Madam President, and support this. I cannot stand here to support a decision that seems to be going against the direct advice of a well-respected chief medical officer. I cannot stand here in this house and support the leader of government business as a minister for health, despite quoting the chief medical officer, sending the warning signals, and support the extension of a state of emergency and reopening of our borders. I cannot.
Senator, you have 15 more minutes.
I'm wrapping up, Madam President. So, Madam President, in a democracy like ours, where I believe that this move is taking away our right to public expression, it's taking away some things that the government knows very well, that could have armed our St. Lucian public to speak out. It's taking away the people's right to speak. I see it not as a democracy, but as a dictatorship. This is a democracy. And as long as this remains a democracy, I stand in this honorable house to support anything that has a semblance of dictatorship in it. So, Madam President, on that basis, I will not support this motion on the basis of what I have described. I thank you, Madam President.
Senator Thomas Francis.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to join you and fellow parliamentarians in extending my sincerest and profound condolences to the family or friends of the late Joyce Ogis on her untimely passing. She was a true icon, Madam President. Tremendous and sterling contribution to sports and to culture in St. Lucia. And I pray that she's going to rest comfortably in her afterlife. Madam President, I rise to add my voice to the debate on the bill before us. As has been said before, the impact of COVID is huge on two levels, on the health level as well as the economic level. As we speak here today, we have many citizens who are not comfortable, citizens who have been displaced due to unemployment and don't know how they're going to survive, don't know where the next meal is coming from. Businesses have been closed ever since we declared a state of emergency in this country. Leaders whom I communicate with regularly, some of them, and they are not sleeping well, Madam President. They are restless on their pillows at night. Their businesses are closed, they're not generating business, they have debts to pay, they have personal needs as well that are not being fulfilled, and there is anxiety. The government's position is not dissimilar. We have a government that, like all other governments, that's facing the music and must provide socially and economically for the country in very trying times. So, Madam President, I want to say upfront that in this environment, tempers will be flying, the anxieties will cause uneasiness. Even in terms of making decisions at leadership level, mistakes will be made. And of course, we need to ensure that there is a level of tolerance, a level of comfort when people offer advice and when people agitate, because there is no template that says how every aspect of this crisis should be managed. There's no template, there is no magic wand, there is no rocket science. So mistakes will happen in the process. Madam President, that brings me to the bill. I've heard the arguments within this chamber so far. I've heard the arguments from the lower house. I've heard arguments from the citizenry. There are positions for and against the extension of the state of emergency, as well as the government's plan to open up the borders next month. Can we say one argument is wrong and the other one is right? I don't think so. On the one hand, people are concerned that if we open the borders more so to welcome visitors from the epicenter, the United States, where we have the most deaths as a result of COVID, their concern is, are we going to be safe? Are there sufficient protocols in place to guarantee the safety of persons coming into our airports, the staff who will be working at the various hotels, and persons whom those visitors will come into contact with? On the other hand, Madam President, the other argument speaks of the reward. So the risk is around the health aspect. The reward is around the economic benefits of opening up the borders to invite tourists to the country. There are persons who are anxious, and quite rightly so, like I said, Madam President, they are anxious to open their businesses. They are anxious to get back to work. They are anxious to generate revenue to sustain their businesses and to get life reasonably back to normal. But the critical question is, Madam, is the reward worth the risk? That is a critical question. Is the reward worth the risk? We are opening up to invite mainly American citizens. Based on news that are coming forth, 40 million Americans are unemployed. Visitors' ability to travel and to spend and to make it worth our while would be a function of their income capacity. Are we sure that, or comfortable that there is enough income capacity in that source market to help us generate the revenue that we're looking to generate, such that one can say perhaps it is worth the risk to allow the visitors to come in? The other source markets, Madam President, the United Kingdom, Canada. Canada's borders remain closed. Canada is afraid to welcome American citizens to their shores because of the same health risk that they have assessed. These source markets, Madam President, we cannot even invite them here, and they too have the same issues around loss of income. In the United Kingdom, I believe the last I read, 10 million people were out of work. In Canada, 7.2 million as of yesterday, based on what I read. So therefore, like I said, the capacity for persons to travel and spend would be a function of whether they themselves are earning and whether they have the spending power to be able to come into our country. So both sides of the argument, Madam President, we can say there's merit. So therefore, we need to strike a balance. How do we strike that balance? That brings me, Madam President, to a critical question that I have, and I believe the question has been asked already. Madam, the extension of the state of emergency months, I believe there is discomfort around that extension. Reason being, when we had active cases, we came into this House on 2 occasions and we extended an approved extension for 1 month, a little less than 1 month in one case. Now, thankfully, we are at a stage where, due to the phenomenal job that has been done, the country is at a state where we have no cases, no active cases. How do we explain, and what is the rationale for requiring an extension of the state of emergency to 4 months when we have no active cases compared to when we had active cases and we only extended it by 1 month? What is the rationale? I was hoping that the leader of government business would have shared that rationale with us. If she did, I did not hear, Madam President. Hopefully when she does her rebuttal, she will elucidate us on that. What is the rationale? We all understand the desperation. We understand there is a need to get back to normalcy. We understand that government would want to alleviate the economic and social plight of the country. But like I said, there must be balance. I do not quite understand also, and my colleague mentioned, Madam President, we are part of CARICOM. St. Lucia is a part of CARICOM. Prime Minister Mia Mottley spoke eloquently to the BBC when she was asked the question, when is the region going to be opening to receive tourists? And she was speaking not just as the Prime Minister of Barbados, she was also speaking in her capacity as head of CARICOM. And she stated, and quite rightly so, that she is not going to be driven by a date. She's not going to be driven by a date, but will ensure that opening will happen when there is safety for the citizens, safety for the workers, and safety for the visitors. And that's the right position, Madam President. But what is mind-boggling, if we are part of CARICOM, why is it as a country we are taking a position which is contrary to what the leader of CARICOM is saying in terms of the region? Why is it so? And perhaps the leader of government business will explain that to us as well. We have taken a decision to go singularly. We have to ensure that our staff, is it a case where we are sure that our workers will be safe, our citizens will be safe, and the visitors themselves will be safe? Why aren't we collaborating? Madam President, I just want at this point to also highlight, in terms of New Zealand, there is a very good story. New Zealand is at level 2, just like our country is, because we are now at level 2, we have no active cases. New Zealand has lifted the state of emergency. And what they have done instead is to put in place a national transition period for civil defense emergency management activities to take place, and they've appointed a transition manager. So therefore, the Prime Minister is not really involved again in managing the crisis, but there's been an appointment of a manager, a transition manager, to see to it that the risk that still exists in terms of ensuring protocols are adhered to and what have you is managed by that body. Madam President, in New Zealand also, part of the new paradigm is, in terms of social distancing, they've moved to 100 persons per gathering. Persons are able to now go to restaurants, and at 15 people at a time can sit at a table at a restaurant, and persons can go to the counter in a restaurant and place orders. Churches are now opened for, and of course, like we said, social gathering, 100 persons, so churches are opened in that regard. So New Zealand has taken an approach which is balanced, an approach where they are managing the risk, the health risk, at the same time managing the economic aspect, so that the level where there's safety and giving due cognizance to what is important. So this is a thrust that I think we can emulate as a country. There is opportunity for us to adopt best practice in that regard, and it is hoped that our powers will ensure that we pay attention to that change. Madam President, like I said, I know it is a difficult time for all. It's a difficult time for the government, but I just want to advise that when there's uncertainty of the magnitude that we experience, uncertainty among the citizens, people are anxious, and when they're anxious, government has a role to set the right tone. And in setting the right tone, communication, and might I add, effective communication is key. Messages delivered must be clear and concise and unambiguous. There must be honesty and consistency. There must be courtesy, and there must be consideration. Government has a role to play in being empathetic and sympathetic to the plight of the people, and how communication is delivered will determine whether there is hope, whether they inspire confidence and inspire hope. This is what our people need at this point in time, Madam President. People need hope. They need to be inspired. They need confidence. And they are looking to our leaders to be able to get that. And indeed, our leaders have a responsibility to ensure that they provide such hope and confidence to our people. A decline in or lack of confidence affects the pace of recovery, Madam President. I'm sure you'll agree. It impacts the pace of recovery. People get even more anxious. People get angry. And speaking of angry, Madam President, I think some of our people have reached boiling point in this country. And this is manifested through the comments that they make on Facebook. From time to time, I go on social media just to read and get a temperature check as to what is happening, to see what the people are feeling, how they're responding to the crisis, how they're responding to what is happening in the country. And Madam President, I sense there is anger. There is anger and impatience. Madam President, there were 2 videos that were shared with me recently. 2 lengthy videos. Usually when I get those videos, I ignore them because I really sometimes don't have the time to sit and listen to them. But when I opened those videos, the tone that I heard, I had to listen. People are angry. And Madam President, how the people are led, like I said, the messages that are put out there, the tone with which messages are delivered to our people, the policies that we implement, the strategies that we also implement to ensure we try to cope, must take into consideration all the factors that would ensure that we ride that storm and come to a place where we are better as a country. So, Madam President, I eagerly await the responses from the Leader of Government Business, and I thank you profoundly for the opportunity to add my voice to this debate. I thank you.
Senator Wazir.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like at the outset to associate with the comments made by my colleague, Independent Senator Mauricio Thomas Francis, and in particular the comments she made with regard to the mood of the citizens of this country. Madam President, fellow senators, I think before going there, I would like to express how fitting I think it is that we acknowledge the nation of Ms. Joyce Auguste. She was a family friend and a creative colleague. I remember her sitting on the balcony of our house at Pave for many a birthday celebration of my parents. And she was part of an age, she was part of a time, some people refer to it as the golden age of St. Lucian society, when culture and art and enlightenment were at the forefront of our quest for progress. But at a personal level, she was also a bridge for me to the work of people like Charles Cadet and Roddy Walcott and the Arts Guild and the Creative and Performing Arts Society. And so part of my own process towards my involvement in the Lighthouse Theatre, St. Lucia's first private theatre, and later the Factory Creative Arts Center, which helped to create an environment for young people to grow and develop. And so later to the School of Music and FRC and the Cultural Development Foundation, which is sadly without a board even as we speak. And so, Madam President, it brings us almost naturally to the theme of continuity, which pervades a lot of what has been said in this House today. The need for continuity from past to present to future, and the need for consistency in what we do and on the road with what we are currently embarking as, or have embarked as a nation, with things that speak to who we are and whence we have come, and how much further we still need to go together, to go successfully together, and the importance of past, present, and future. And that is all I'm going to say for the time being on the unsatisfactory treatment of historic and cultural assets like Joyce. Life and her death should remind us about the importance of continuity and consistency. And let us admit also, as we honor her, that Joyce was not entirely happy about the way that we treat our creative people in this country. She was not entirely happy at all with the attitude that the state sometimes demonstrates, that we take our artists on board when we need them, and then we forget them when we don't. And that, Madam President, speaks directly to the fact that many artists in this country today are waiting for a response, for some attention, for some assistance, for some support in the current COVID environment, because artists too are a vital part of the glorious tourism industry of which we are so concerned. And it is very disquieting for many to give so unstintingly and generously to the national telethon to raise funds that there has been as yet no declared program of support to the arts, cultural and entertainment sector. And so on their behalf, I am pleading that we do something as quickly as we can. Before launching into the matter at hand, Madam President, which is the extension of the state of emergency, if you will please permit me a minute or two by way of preamble. I am not fond of speaking about myself in this honorable house because I find it quite vain and unnecessary, and especially because we are here to address matters of state and government. However, Madam President, it would seem that remarks made by myself in this house have elevated myself to some level of wish to assume. So let me just say as briefly as possible.
Senator, I trust your preamble will be
very short,
short and
President.
concise, since
Yes,
you have
it will.
not yet addressed the debate at hand.
fundamental case. And if we cease to fulfill that function, Madam Chair, then the Governor General should happily relieve us of our positions here. Now, in this debate, Madam President, by the time I am finished speaking, 5 persons in this honorable House will have indicated to the government a deep discomfort with the matter before us. I cannot believe that all 5 of those persons so dislike the government that they would bring that argument almost consistently to this floor. And I would like to make an appeal passionately to the government side not to extend the state of emergency, not because it is something that you think people are against, but because it is not good for the current state of the country. I want to make an impassioned plea. For once, heed the voices of the 5 people on this side of the sides of the table who have not, I assure you, coordinated their statements in any way to embarrass anybody, and who are passionately bringing you news from the field, from the street, from the hills, from the valleys, that this is not a good move. It is not a good move for you all. It is not a good move for any of us. It is unnecessary. And Madam President, the hinge of this matter is in the last paragraph on page 2 of the document we are asked to consider. And the language is very clear. And whereas it is necessary to further extend for an additional period, the last paragraph on page 2. And whereas it is necessary to further extend for an additional period, etc., etc. Madam President, it is my submission to this honorable House that that necessity has not been sufficiently proven. And therefore, I disagree with the summation that it is necessary to extend to September. To September, the state of emergency in this country. It is at odds with what we are being told, both by government representatives and by medical professionals who seem to have taken us through this crisis with much applause and professionalism, and we have stood in this House and we have applauded them, and it warmed the hearts of St. Lucians to see us united, I think, in our support of these people. And it has been said over and over again how the frontline staff have been so admirable. Let us please not besmirch the progress that has been achieved with this motion. I am appealing to you passionately. It is not too late. We do not have to go through with this. 5 people in the room have stood and told you it is a bad idea. Just please accept that we are genuine for once. The mood of the people raised by my colleague, independent senator, is palpable, Madam President. I too received a video that so chastised the Prime Minister, his family, his wife. I don't want to go into the details. It is the most distasteful thing that I have seen in a long time. I do not believe that it is reflective of how St. Lucians wish to express themselves, but I think it is reflective of a mounting frustration which has been brought about by confinement, by uncertainty, by lack of employment, by desperation about money and jobs and welfare and children and school and laptops and all the rest of it. So whether or not you agree with the person expressing, I would like to suggest that you see it as a symptom of what is happening on the ground. And this is not a message from Cap Estate or Rodney Bay. This is a message from Sarot and Marigot and Fonigois, etc., etc. Okay? And many other neighborhoods, Georgeville, Concrete Road, where some of us are out there trying to assist, trying to preserve life, trying to support families. And Tomaso, you know who you are. Madam President, the necessity of the state of emergency has not been demonstrated. It has not been demonstrated in this House, and it certainly has not been demonstrated to the people of St. Lucia. So there is a dissonance. A dissonance is a discord. A discord is a discomfort. A discomfort is something that human beings instinctively recognize and instinctively react to. I don't know if some of you all are too young or too old to remember. There was a program on television called Sesame Street. And one of the programs in there was one of these things doesn't belong, one of the segments. It was a recurring segment. And I think it went, one of these things is not like the other. One of these things does not belong. One of these things is not like the other. Tell me which one before I finish my song. And they would show you, say, 3 fruits and then a plane. And instinctively, children will know that there is something dissonant about 1, 2, 3 fruits and then a plane. They don't belong. Dissonance is a natural human reaction to discord, to disorder, to patterns that don't fit. And we have a series of patterns that do not fit. And what's more important, Madam President, is that the human spirit will try to resolve that dissonance. It will. It is in children, it is in young adults, so when you see unrest, it is a natural human reaction to discomfort. I'm not making this up, you can look it up. Cognizance and dissonance. So let us try and look for some order. Let us try and look for some consistency that will bring peace and comfort to our people, Madam President, because the people of St. Lucia generally in a responsible way, and it has been part of the solution of this crisis that we have addressed it together. And I see people, mothers, fathers, children out there wearing their masks. You stand too close to somebody and say, hey guys, what's wrong with you guys? Are 6 feet. And we are taking this seriously. So the government also has to demonstrate that it too is consistent. So if we are thankful for 0 deaths, then let us not bring death to our door. If we are inviting visitors, it cannot be from the center of the epidemic. I'm not saying that Caribbean tourism will fill those beds or fill those accounts. And I recognize that we are in a difficult fiscal position. Everybody, I think, acknowledges that and will not deny that. But it could be then that if we just wait, we will be in a better position sometime from now than rushing to unholy action. It is also possible, Madam President, that the conditions that we require airlines to meet in order to fly safely are not going to be met by the airlines themselves. And it is possible that they will not be able to fly with sufficient low-risk conditions that when visitors arrive here, that they will be COVID-free or at least very low risk of COVID infection. So we need to consider this very carefully and consider, as has been said, that we may be exposing our own people upon arrival, and the possible community spread that will arise from that will be very rapid and beyond our ability to cope. I would like to suggest, therefore, that for our medical professionals, as we have done before, there are several alternatives on the table in terms of a slower opening of the economy. And there is also, I think, a lot of logic in allowing the domestic economy to become as functional as possible while maintaining the safeguards which are absolutely necessary. And again, the example of New Zealand is an objective reality with a success track record. Let us look at that because it is working. And even if we cannot immediately return to international transactions, international trade like tourism, getting the domestic economy as fully open as possible, I believe, is a viable strategy in the interim, while we consider exactly how we are going to protect our people from possible contagion. So I hope it is not too late for us to be rational about the extension of the state of emergency, and I would like to appeal to all of us to please reconsider this matter and do not simply pass it because we have the votes. Also, in terms of dissonance and what creates discomfort, Madam President, we are in a crisis, we acknowledge we're in a crisis, but we present estimates which do not reflect that crisis. Again, that creates instability in the thinking of the people. I don't know if it's too late, but to me, an interim budget that addressed the COVID-19 period of time between now and maybe the same September that we are considering as some kind of natural deadline, we should be looking at an interim budget which takes us through the crisis. We have a shortfall. The shortfall has been identified, and yet still we are only addressing it on the current side. We are only salaries and other short-term commitments. And somehow the capital account, the public sector investment program, seems to be sacred. It seems to be untouchable. And that does not make a whole lot of sense to most people who are not maybe sitting with the financial team that is planning the budget. But I can tell you, for most people on the ground, it does not make sense. Now, if we are going to eat cricks for 3 months, let us all eat cricks. But if I catch you at Bryden's buying champagne, I'm going to be suspicious. We can eat cricks, you know, we're all willing to eat cricks. Not a problem. A little cheese, a little sardine, we could live with that. But then you see other actions which are not consistent with the Prime Minister's word was rationing. And I support his use of the word rationing. I think it is appropriate. It is highly appropriate. It is highly strategic. It is the right thing to do. But we should all be rationing. We should all be rationing, and we have to ration expending priority projects at this time, Madam President. And I believe that if we were seen to be doing that, people would be a lot more comfortable with a proposal which looks at September as some kind of natural deadline and proposes in that light to extend the state of emergency. Madam President, it is my considered opinion that the necessity of the extension has not been clearly demonstrated. We are in a situation where, in my view, the impact on the economy is going to exceed current estimates. We are losing at least 6 months of normal economic activity. That is what is going to happen. So for us to continue as if the shortfall is going to miraculously be filled, I think is unrealistic. And again, people are going to be uncertain and going to say, okay, what is the motive for undertaking certain things? Why are we concentrating on bricks and mortar instead of concentrating on brain bellies? Because for the average citizen, that is where the pain is felt. In the brain, especially for our kids, and in the belly because we have families to feed. The response that is being laid before us is further borrowing. We have to speak later today on a total of $85 million from local banks. Added to that, almost $30 million, 29 to be precise, from the IMF. That's a lot of money, Madam President. That's a lot of money. And we are doing this at a time when our ability to repay and to regenerate is at an all-time low. So again, I return to the business, to the question of discomfort. Discomfort at a guttural level, not even up here, you know,